Hello folks, Paul here, UK Rails and More. Hope you're all keeping safe and well. Today's episode, I was just going to talk a little bit more ahead of the new layout build, which is starting later this month. And I was going to talk about operations, train configurations, gradients and scenic brakes. So if you like the sound of that, you know what I'm going to say. It's kettles on time and I'll bring you back for more. Bye for now. As always, can I just say a very big thank you to all subscribers and also another big thank you to all long-term ticket holders. Thanks very much. Okay guys, so the first thing I was going to just talk a little bit about was the operation and how it's actually going to work. Because where I've not got the detailed track plan as yet, I certainly need to know where lines are going to enter each of the module and where they're going to exit. So it made sense to have a look at that as well. Now I've already got an idea in my head of how this is working. I've been kind of developing it a bit over the last few months. But basically, for anyone who isn't already aware, basically it is going to be a split level layout that comes across all of these modules. There's going to be an upper level and a lower level. The upper level is going to be twin track, okay, and the lower is going to be twin track as well. So that would give obviously the ability to run 4 trains at any one time. Now within that, what I want to do as well is incorporate a couple of passing loops. So these passing loops, there'll be 2 on the upper layout and also on the upper lines, and there'll be 2 on the lower lines as well. So basically it will allow me to store 8 trains on the layout on the running lines to choose when I can have up to 4 running at any one time. There'll also be, for those who aren't already aware, a TMD, which is going to be a direct rail services TMD. And there will be some capacity to store some train stock there as well, and also there'll be a preservation line, so that will allow me some additional capacity as well. Now if the layout does develop further than that, then potentially I could add a fiddle yard, but I think that's certainly going to be plenty to be going on with. So yeah, operation. So part of my criteria to start off with was I wanted to display as many of the trains on the layout where I can, as you would see on the real main line, and also where the scene requires it, have kind of minimal trains. So I want to do it quite effectively. So I've not got track everywhere, but when the place where it kind of warrants it, say in the industrial area or the town area where you'll have more lines, then I'll build more lines into that point. So in this layout, I'm going to be using a lot of things such as scenic brakes, which I'll come onto in a little bit. And also I'm going to be basically hiding lines and making lines reappear at certain points to kind of benefit that particular scene. Okay, so just to put it really simply, okay, on the upper level, what I'm going to be looking at, the passing loops, I'll have a passing loop on the inner here. And this one, my idea is this is going to cover into one of the scenic sections. So this will be the sort of, it will go into a Peak District section where the line will really warrant having a single track line, as you would see around some of the quarry areas, around Buxton and places like that, where you will have a setup where it may have once it would have been double lines, but then they've just maintained one freight line going, so that would have that option there. In another area, say for instance the industrial area, I'd have another loop coming off, which could be potentially going somewhere else, and that would maybe be a single track where I'd have freight lines, just freight trains reappearing here. So that's where I would store, rather than just having 2 passing loops there. I've got those options. On the lower level, I'll also do a similar thing, so I've got the option to make trains reappear and disappear depending on the scene. Okay, so the second thing I was just going to talk about a little bit was train configurations. Okay, so I've started putting together some stock. You will have seen various reviews of what I've got going at the moment. If you've not, please have a look at those and you'll see some of the stock I've started putting together. Okay, so the era is going to be modern era for this layout, with the option of in the future making it sort of an 80s and 90s, so I can swap around with it depending on the stock that I'm using. I want the upper lines to be quite heavily influenced by the kind of quarry trains that you get around Buxton and the Peak Forest. If you've seen those Peak Forest videos, have a look at that. Some of the trains you'll see there. I want to kind of get very much a flavour of that for the upper running lines. With the option of also running a kind of a rail tours type train, as you sometimes would see around those areas, and also with the option of having some kind of track maintenance, you know, rail inspection trains, that kind of thing as well, which you'll see in those areas as well. So the way that's going to work a little bit in practicality is this is the first scenic section. Now I've started just doing plans, playing around with plans, just scribbling them down, but I've come up with something that's going to look a little bit like this for the first module. Okay, so this is the upper lines, the two running upper lines, and they will go around here and over there. Okay, here you'll have a branch line that will come off, and this will actually form one of the passing loops. Now these little bits I've marked here, it's just going to show where the older disused line, or the older line that's now no longer used, is going to run. So the infrastructure, like the scenic planning and inspiration video, it will have the infrastructure for double track lines, but only actually one line in operation. So on this inner loop, I've got the option of running a freight train as if it's coming from the quarries, and I'm going to try and run those effectively as well. So if this is a quarry scene over in this area, this is a kind of the scenic section in the middle, suburban type area, and then I've got my city town areas here. I'm going to be having full quarry trains, stone carrying that direction, and then I'm going to be having empty ones going up in this direction as well. So the upper lines, the main thing I want to know is where they're actually going to come into the board. Now this is a 2-foot board, here's a 1-foot board, and basically I want to have them coming in around here so that I get a nice scenic split here of these embankments. This is all going to be well, this bit's going to be embankment at least anyway. The idea is this is going to be higher ground up this area and a kind of a valley area with the river running through around here. And what that's going to do is I'm going to have this embankment, the higher level one here, and then I'm going to have the lower level line coming from a station that I'm going to have in this area, and then some nice long sweeping curves that are going to go over here. And this line is going to cross the river around here. In fact, they're both going to cross the river. As it goes towards the higher ground, it's going to go more into cuttings in this area. This is just my additional ideas. It's going to kind of develop as we see, and as I get this plan more detailed, I'm going to bring you back, because that's what this series is all about really. I wanted to show you my thought processes as we go along the way, because I found it really interesting when other people have done that. So hopefully if you do too, that will be great. So yeah, that's going to be the basic configuration. So the reason I've chosen this one is because there's very little, you'll notice there's very little in terms of points. So I'm going to be building this mainly as a scenic area with very little. It's quite a simple layout here at this point because it's all going to be about running the trains. There's going to be the end of a station here, and I'll speak about that a little bit more in a moment. But other than that, it's all going to be about viaducts, bridges over rivers, embankments that are breaking off and coming here, so split embankments, and very much about the feature of that can really display the trains well at different elevations. So that's what that's going to be about, this one. Okay, so I'll bring you back in a moment. We'll have a look at some more garden running of the latest review I've done, which was the rail freight sector distribution sector delivery, class 47, the Sapper. So let's see a bit more of that. Okay guys, welcome back. Just before I move on to the next section, I was just going to speak a little bit about the train configurations. I didn't really mention that on some of the lower level sections, but that's going to be more your conventional mainline traffic. Okay, so you're going to have more passenger services on there, and also more conventional freight such as container freight on those lines. Again, with the option for rail tours traffic from the preservation line, and also the option of some other sort of specialist maintenance trains and things like that. Okay guys, the second thing I wanted to just talk about a little bit was gradients. Now, to get the train from the upper level to the lower level, I'm going to be incorporating a gradient. Okay, now my idea on this one is that I'm going to have a point coming off here. So there'll be various non-scenic sections, and this gradient at this point, it just wouldn't really work properly for it to be on display. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'll have one line here going from the upper level. Obviously I'll have another point so both lines can access it, and that will start to commence a gradient going down from that upper level. Now this gradient, I'm probably going to have it extended, so it's going to be quite long, and it may even go down. Obviously the longer I can get it, the more difference in height I've got the potential to have the track beds. But I want this line to come into the next section, all hidden from view at this point, you know, and then this is going to be a non-scenic section. That's just going to be a functional section. But basically I want this upper line to come in something like this, because that's going to feature in the next section. Okay, so that gradient there, I've got a good distance to cover that difference in height, and as it continues further along here, apologies if this is blindingly obvious to anyone, I'm just trying to really aim it to be helpful to anyone that may be building a new layout and perhaps avoiding some of the mistakes I've made in the past. But basically the further the distance we can have, the bigger that, the more gradual and shallow that gradient we can make, and that's going to be good for train performance as well. Okay, so what I may be doing is I may continue the gradient a little bit on one of the scenic sections. So I've got visually, as you would see in the real world, I can make a feature of that. So I've got a bit of a visual gradient going on in this industrial area, this town city stroke area I'm going to develop here. But what I want to do is I want to have a scenic section, but not at the cost of poor train operation. Okay, so again, this might be fairly obvious, but when you're planning your gradients, obviously I'm covering a good distance here to do this, so I can have a very gradual gradient. What I would say is just test your trains beforehand, and not just the locomotives, but with the train lengths that you want to use, because you'd be surprised at how much of a difference it makes when you start adding the weight of a lot of coaches or a lot of wagons onto that train, how that's going to affect its performance. If you can have a really quite a shallow gradient, then that's going to be good for train performance. But obviously if you try and make it too steep, it can cause you all manner of problems. So in reality, here we go, we're looking at how high we need to make it and what space we've got available to cover it, and how we can sort of feature that into the layout as well. I'll just give you another little idea here, going slightly off the point, but it may be of interest to you. In aviation, you have something called top of climb and also top of descent, and it's very important to work out where those are going to be based on your aircraft climb performance. Okay, so if your aircraft climbs at 500 feet per minute, and that's its best rate of climb, in still air, it may look something like this. Effectively, obviously, it's not to scale, but it may look something like this. So you know that in still air, at 500 feet per minute, you will get to, say, 3,000 foot by a certain distance over the ground, okay? If you've got strong tailwind, you're still climbing at 500 feet per minute, but that's going to be much shallower. So it's going to bring your top of climb somewhere like that. Again, if you've got a strong headwind, that is going to make that climb much steeper. So you're going to effectively get there at much shorter distance over the ground. So yeah, it's just worth bearing in mind things like that. So in the world of aviation, that can be very important, because you could have a block of controlled airspace around Manchester here, something like that. And your clearance from it could be very relevant. So you do a lot of calculations based on the wind to work out things like this. Okay. Now, what I would say, I found very interesting here, and it was a bit of an eye-opener to me, just how many gradients you get going on the main line. You know, you're aware of like famous ones and Shap and places like that, where you've got, you know, gradients where you'd have I forget the word for it now, but you'd have a pilot train as well that would couple on to give that extra tractive power to get up that big gradient. But in actual fact, there's gradients all over the place on the main line to different extents. Now, I saw a main line, I don't know if any of you are aware, but there's a good channel, a fellow called Don Coffey, I think he's called, and basically he's a mainline driver, and he does some very good videos where he shows the driving of going along the main line, certain areas. He's done one from the area from Manchester Airport on the line going down to Manchester Piccadilly, and he can get up to full power in that train by a certain point. I think it's somewhere near Gatley, and the gradient is such that that train will then roll all the way into Manchester Piccadilly, which is a considerable distance. So it's just really really interesting, and he gives a kind of a heads up with text just showing how much those gradients matter. And also things like your performance as well. So, you know, the effect of a curved gradient on the train as well, all comes into account. So it's all really interesting stuff. But my basic advice, my top tip, because as I say, I've made this mistake before, test it, not just a loco, but as big a capacity train as you want to run on your layout. Test it to check it can get it. And again, it might sound obvious, but different trains have different performances. So on the lockdown layout, the steam engine Jubilee certainly struggled a lot more than some of the other diesels, and different ones would have certain points where they'd struggle more than others. So yeah, hopefully you found that little section useful. I think maybe time for a brew, and certainly a look at some more garden running. So here we go. I'll bring you back in the next bit, and we'll talk a little bit more about scenic brakes. Bye for now. Okay guys, that's a rather nice cup of tea there. I hope you're enjoying the format of this video with the little bits of running session. I will be doing a full garden running session with this locomotive coming through fairly soon as well, possibly with some music. But yeah, if you're enjoying the video or you've any suggestions, please leave us comments, because that really helps. And if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing. That'd be really great. Anyway, back to the plans. Okay guys, welcome back. Hope you're still with us and you've still got your eyes open. Yeah, if you do like this video, I'd be really grateful, appreciative if you could give it a thumbs up. And also, if you'd be interested in subscribing with the notification bell, you'll be fully up to date with, you'll get a little email to YouTube channel just letting you know each time I post a video, and you can follow the whole journey along the way from sort of design, going through the build, the problems I encounter. I'm not going to edit out those problems. I'm going to say, look, here we go. I've got a problem with this now. What do we think? Have you got ideas? That kind of thing. Make it as interactive as I can. And also you'll see it through to the running. I'm hoping to get this one out in the garden, the modules. So I'll build a plan to get trains through them and around, so I can get some more garden running going. Okay. So yeah, the next section I wanted to just talk about is scenic breaks. Now, anyone who knows, who's built a double O gauge layout before, knows that sometime, I'm sure people have done this, you start off the build, you start off the planning, and then you realise, you think, hang on a minute, how much room is this going to take? And then you realise you've got a problem with it, because half of what you wanted to fit in there, you can't do. Okay, I've made that mistake before many times, and what I'm going to be doing with this one is using more kind of scenic breaks and more carefully as well than I have done in the past, to try and get the best visual appearance for the layout. Now, something to consider if you are completely new to the hobby, what you have got the option, if you go for N gauge, there is, I think, Z gauge, or there used to be, but certainly N gauge, that will give you considerably more capacity to build very realistic platform lengths, things like that. So yeah, that's definitely worth having a look at. Certainly double O gauge, you are not going to get full size platforms, you're not going to get full length, it will take a massive area. So if you want to make one particular station the whole feature of your layout, some people do, that's absolutely brilliant, and that can be a real feature and focal point, so that looks great. I don't want to go for that one in this layout because I want to sort of cover more scenes. So what I'll be doing is some clever use of scenic breaks, and I'll give you a bit of an example of that here, hopefully. Okay, so what I've got is a scenic section here, and I'll have a station here. But what you'll only see visually is about 2 foot of that station, or however many coaches that is, but very small section of it. I'm going to make it very highly detailed, so it looks really interesting, and there'll be roads and things, and a road bridge. There's going to be the river coming through it here as well, and the configuration of that, the platforms and etc. It's not going to definitely be like this. It may have different lines, etc. I've not fully decided that, but the basis of it is it's going to be a very you're just going to get a section of a station. Okay, and that's going to give me greater potential for the length of the scenery here, which is what it's all about, just displaying those trains running through the layout. Again, there'll be a non-scenic section here that's just about moving a train from one place to another place where it's required to come out onto another scenic section. Okay, and here there's going to be a sort of town, industrial city scope area. Okay, and again, I'm going to have a completely different character of a station there. Okay, so that's going to be very much a city type station, which will have different characteristics entirely to this one. Okay, so that's what I'm going to be doing, is using scenic breaks very carefully around these areas. I'll go into greater detail as I go along and I start to build this layout, but basically they will work hopefully to good effect in displaying the trains at the best. Now obviously with something like this, effectively I'm going to have a very short area just given to the stations. So obviously what you're going to do is, with longer length trains, you're going to have the tail end of it in this section, the front of it just stopping here in this section. Okay, but that doesn't matter, because the whole idea, to anyone who's new, of the scenic break is, what it means is that when we're viewing it, if we're viewing the industrial area, or I'm filming the industrial area, this bit is gone completely out of mind. All we're going to be doing is looking at the industrial area, so that doesn't matter. Again, likewise, if we're looking at the suburban stroke green belt stroke as developer as I go along stroke section like this, again, the industrial area. So the whole mind and the whole way of filming is going to be looking at that area from that scenic break. And I'm going to use things, as many of us have done, such as bridges, cuttings, whatever I need to do to make that happen. And that's going to be very much as we go along. Okay, another quick thing I wanted to just mention was back scenes. So some of these lines I want to make a bit of a feature of this embankment split here, the way these come along. But what I also want to do is I want to hide some of these lines, because I don't want too many lines everywhere. It can make it look wrong. In the industrial or town area, I'll have more lines. I want that to look more as the network would look as you're approaching big major stations in a city. So you're going to have more lines in this kind of area. Other than that, some of these lines are going to be hidden from view. So there'll be back scenes that are going to hide it out. So the eye is going to be focused on these nice sweeping curves here, the nice feature here, the river, and then operationally it should be quite good as well. Just one other thing I wanted to mention about the operation while it's just sprung to mind is that there's going to be two other, this scenic section. I'm going to have the Peak District section, I'm going to have the Town City section, and I'm also going to have two different modules as well. I'm going to have a TMD. Now when I say a TMD, I'm aware how big those can be. I'm going to do, again with scenic breaks, I'm going to have a section of a TMD, so that will allow me to fit that into the overall build. And also a preservation line with potentially a small preservation line station, and that's going to take a bit of an influence from the East Lancs Railway, but also potentially a bit of interest or a bit of inspiration from Buxton, which isn't, it's a main line, well it's a branch line station, effectively a branch line terminus. We're going to be having a bit more of a look at that in the next scenic inspiration trip that I do, looking at the Peak District. But the way that works potentially as a terminus, and use that, incorporate that with an engine shed, fueling point for the preservation railway. Okay, so I'm going to be including that as well. Now the two of those, what I wanted to really do, which is where I've waffled on a little bit about that, but what I wanted to do is on the upper level lines, I would incorporate probably the preservation line on the upper level, and on the lower level lines I'm probably going to incorporate the TMD. Okay, so that just means that I've got, operationally I've not got the TMD and the preservation line all on the same track level. I've got one, you know, so I've just got, I can be working away on one of them and having potentially trains running on the other one, and then doing some more operations on the preservation line where you send a train out around the quarry tour, or again the lower line having another maintenance train or whatever going out from the TMD. So that's basically, hope that makes sense, how it's going to work. Now one of the other things I've got is with this this whole idea, with the module idea, I can build one section from start to finish, so I don't need to worry too much about the lines, and as long as I know where they're going to leave the board and I know that will work, I can then forget about the planning for the rest of it. That will all be done as I go along the way. But just to give you a quick summary, so this is the this is the lower line here. This will come out underneath this upper line here, and then this will be the gradient coming down. This will be the loop that will go round and rejoin around the other side, which I've yet to design. And you've got your lower level main lines and your upper level Peak Forest type lines. So I hope that makes sense. If you've got any questions about it, or if you've envisaged any issues that I may not have seen, please leave a note of that in the comments. If you've liked it, please give it a thumbs up. That would be really appreciated. And again, if you want to know what goes on with other videos and updated of them, please consider subscribing with the notification bell. Next, I will have a full review of the full garden running session. So I've got one of those coming up. I've got another review coming up, and we've also got that, weather permitting, trip for another scenic inspiration visit. So we've got that to look forward to as well. So in the meantime, thanks very much for watching, commenting, subscribing, etc. Take care, keep safe and well, and I'll speak to you very soon. Bye for now.